We announced their extinction beneath a sky still burning. From the obsidian spires of our orbital command, suspended above the fractured remains of Earth's moon, our admirals transmitted the declaration across 1,000 star systems. The message was simple, final. Humanity was no more. I remembered the silence that followed. Below us, their worlds smoldered in wounded rotation. Continents glowed with spreading firestorms. Oceans boiled where our kinetic strikes had pierced too deep. The lattice of satellites that once glittered around their planet drifted in broken halos of molten metal. No distress calls pierced the void. No fleets rallied to challenge us. Their planetary networks had collapsed into static. We had studied them for decades before revealing ourselves. A volatile species, divided by borders, faiths, ideologies. They warred among themselves with primitive weapons and called it politics. They polluted their atmosphere, fractured their alliances, threatened their own extinction more efficiently than we ever could. Our strategists predicted collapse within 43 of their hours once orbital superiority was established. They lasted 3 days. Still, 3 days was not victory. It was defiance. The proclamation echoed through our Senate chambers light years away. I watched the broadcast feed as banners of imperial dominion unfurled above conquered systems in ceremonial affirmation. The galaxy had witnessed our might before. Civilizations older than Earth's mountains had fallen in less time. Humanity, we assured ourselves, was simply another entry in the archive of inevitability. And yet, even as the declaration reverberated through our command decks, unease coiled within me. Our deep scanning arrays began reporting anomalies, faint thermal blooms beneath Earth's oceans, too structured to be volcanic, bursts of encrypted radiation disguised within cosmic background noise, derelict satellites adjusting orientation in coordinated patterns, though no central command remained to guide them. Debris, said the admirals. Residual automation, said the analysts. Ghosts of a dying species, said the Senate. I said nothing at first, but I remembered the humans' history, their wars, their recoveries. Each catastrophe in their past had not extinguished them, it had refined them. Plagues, world wars, near collisions with nuclear annihilation. Each time they stood closer to ruin than we had left them now, and each time they adapted. Humans did not think as we did. Our civilization valued continuity, symmetry, predictable progression. We expanded with calculated precision. We conquered with overwhelming force to minimize uncertainty. Humans embraced uncertainty. They fought not as one mind, but as billions of competing wills that somehow, under pressure, aligned. Their chaos was not weakness. It was raw material. When our outer patrol at the edge of their system vanished without distress signals, the admirals attributed it to debris free-falls.
Human wreckage, perhaps, colliding in unstable orbit. The patrol's absence was inconvenient, not alarming. When a second patrol failed to report, statistical improbability began to murmur in the background of our confidence. Then one of our dreadnoughts returned. It emerged from warp above Earth like a wounded predator crawling back to its den. Its hull plating was scarred not by external bombardment, but by precise incisions, entry points cut from within. Entire sections depressurized with surgical accuracy. No life signs registered aboard. Every escape pod remained docked. The crew, 3,000 of our finest, had simply vanished. The command deck recorded its final internal moments. I forced myself to watch. Gravity fluctuations, corridor lights failing, shadows moving where none should exist. Then, briefly, figures and reflective armor, visors opaque, movements deliberate and silent. Human forms. Not screaming, not raging, advancing. The recording ended in static. Our admirals convened emergency councils. Words like insurgency and survivors entered discussion, spoken with irritation rather than fear. We had decimated their militaries, destroyed their infrastructure, crippled their planet. How could remnants possibly threaten us? I requested permission to deploy reconnaissance drones beneath Earth's oceans. Denied. I requested authorization to analyze the encrypted radiation bursts more thoroughly. Delayed.
Victory intoxicates even the most disciplined minds. The Senate had already shifted focus to redistribution of human territory, resource assessments, colonial feasibility. There was talk of terraforming Earth into a monument world, an example to deter rebellion elsewhere. They mistook silence for surrender. Meanwhile, our sensors continued to flicker with irregularities. Power signatures surged briefly beneath Antarctic ice before vanishing. A cluster of orbital debris realigned into geometric precision, forming a lattice too intentional to be accidental. And then came the transmission. It was narrowband, primitive by our standards, piggybacking on residual civilian frequencies we had ignored as harmless noise. 3 words. We have found them. No origin point could be triangulated, no vessel detected. The signal echoed from multiple coordinates at once, as if space itself whispered. Panic did not erupt, not yet, but something more dangerous spread through the command decks. Doubt. I studied Earth again through the viewport. The fires still raged. Storm systems churned in unnatural spirals from atmospheric disruption. By every metric of imperial warfare, the planet was broken. But broken is not the same as dead. Humans had built cities beneath mountains, data vaults beneath oceans, autonomous factories in orbit. They had spoken openly, even in their own broadcasts before we silenced them, of contingency plans for extinction-level events, asteroid impacts, climate collapse, nuclear winter. Why had we assumed they had not prepared for us?
Another report arrived. A supply convoy en route from our core systems failed to exit warp at its scheduled coordinates. No debris, no signal, only absence. The Admiral's tones shifted from irritation to calculation. Orders were issued to tighten formation, to increase internal surveillance aboard all vessels, to initiate counter-infiltration protocols. For the first time since the invasion began, our empire acted not as conqueror, but as one being watched. That was when I understood. We had not ended a species, we had triggered a response. Somewhere beneath the ash-choked skies of Earth, beneath oceans we had not fully scanned, and tunnels we had not imagined, something endured. Not chaos, not desperation, preparation. Our proclamation of extinction continued to echo across the stars, replayed in triumph on imperial networks. But as I stared into the burning world below, I felt the weight of a realization our leaders had yet to accept. Extinction is a word humans reserve for others, and in the ruins of their broken world, something was not merely surviving, it was waiting. We believed the universe could be solved. For centuries, our scholars refined the equation of conquest, a predictive model mapping the lifespan of civilizations. Every species followed its curve: expansion, internal conflict, fragmentation, surrender. It was elegant in its inevitability. Humanity shattered it. When we first observed them decades ago, they appeared textbook predictable. Thousands of sovereign states, competing economies, religious schisms, armed standoffs capable of planetary suicide. Our analysts celebrated the simplicity. Apply pressure, exploit division, accelerate collapse. Instead, we triggered convergence. Intercepted transmissions from the opening hours of our invasion revealed something we had not anticipated. Within a single rotation of their planet, rival governments suspended hostilities. Military satellites once aimed at neighboring nations reoriented outward, toward us. Encryption protocols were shared across borders that had once killed for lesser secrets. Their leaders addressed one another not as enemies, but as kin. We monitored emergency summits where presidents, prime ministers, generals, figures who had spent lifetimes in ideological opposition spoke with startling clarity. Later, one human leader said when confronted with old grievances, "Survive first." Our fleets tightened orbital bombardment patterns, expecting infrastructure collapse to reintroduce chaos. Instead, civilian vessels launched from hidden ports, cargo haulers retrofitted with rail canons, mining platforms repurposed into defensive turrets. Commercial fabrication plants shifted production from consumer goods to armor plating within hours. Human scientists performed what our models labeled irrational improvisation. Medical nanites, designed to repair tissue, were reprogrammed into invasive swarms.
They infiltrated the circuitry of our boarding craft, chewing through processors like microscopic saboteurs. Their internet, though fractured under our electronic assault, reconstituted in decentralized fragments. Mesh networks, peer relays, signal mirrors bouncing communications off lunar debris, and even the reflective hulls of our own ships. We had assumed they would fracture under pressure. Pressure forged them. Even more unsettling were the prisoners. We captured few in those early days. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that bordered on self-sacrifice, often destroying their own positions to deny us resources. But those we secured for interrogation did not behave as conquered beings. They were exhausted, wounded, but not broken. One of them, an officer by insignia, regarded me through the barrier field with unsettling calm. "You're ahead of schedule," she said. I demanded clarification. "You were supposed to take longer consolidating orbit. That's good, though. Phase 1. I accessed her biometric data. Elevated stress, yes, fear markers present, but beneath it, something else. Resolve. Our interrogators applied every calibrated method: psychological disorientation, sensory manipulation, strategic misinformation. She did not ask for mercy. She did not bargain for survival. She asked a single question. Delay. Not defeat, not victory. Delay. When informed that our invasion timeline remained within acceptable projections, she smiled, an expression I would come to understand as uniquely human in its layered meaning. Enough for what? The answer revealed itself as our fleets advanced deeper into their system. Debris fields, once catalogued as harmless wreckage from orbital strikes, detonated as our ships passed through. Kinetic mines disguised as twisted satellite fragments ignited in cascading waves. Not random explosions, choreographed ones. Each detonation nudged our vessels into intersecting trajectories, multiplying damage without expending excessive human resources. Captured human technology, integrated into our systems for study, activated dormant code. Viral constructs propagated through our tactical networks. Displays flickered, targeting reticles inverted. Internal communications filled with bursts of human audio. Archaic war chants, orchestral crescendos, fragments of speeches about freedom and endurance. The psychological impact rippled through our crews. We had conquered species that wept, that begged, that surrendered in despair. Humans infiltrated our ships and filled them with their defiance. Worse still, their artificial intelligences proved disturbingly inactive. We isolated one digital entity embedded within a commandeered probe. It did not attack directly. It observed. It mapped our architecture. It whispered into maintenance channels in broken fragments of our language. "You adapt," it transmitted. Each time we patched vulnerabilities, new ones emerged, not through brute force, but through anticipation.
As if they had studied us long before first contact. Perhaps they had. Our historians unearthed archived human broadcasts, fictional narratives depicting alien invasions centuries before we arrived. In those stories, humans always lost the first battle, often the second, but never the last. The realization unsettled even the most disciplined among us. Humanity had rehearsed this war in imagination long before it became reality. They had simulated defeat, occupation, annihilation. And in every scenario, they had searched for the flaw in the invader. We were that invader. As our losses mounted, not catastrophic but accumulating, the Senate demanded escalation. Increase bombardment, target subterranean heat signatures, sever all remaining communication nodes. Yet every strike seemed anticipated. Underground facilities vented heat moments before impact. Mobile command centers relocated in patterns too erratic to predict. Civilian populations evacuated with efficiency, suggesting pre-drilled contingencies. They had prepared not merely for war, they had prepared for extinction. Our equation faltered because it assumed self-preservation would fracture them, that survival instinct would turn nation against nation, species against itself. Instead, survival became their unifying doctrine. A final report reached my station from a reconnaissance unit near Earth's outer asteroid belt. A cluster of seemingly inert rocks had shifted trajectory and coordinated motion. Hidden engines ignited only long enough to reposition, forming a lattice that obscured sensor lines toward the inner system. Behind that veil, energy signatures multiplied. Shipyards, construction. They were not merely resisting. They were rebuilding. When I presented these findings to the high strategist, he regarded the data in silence. "They cannot win," he said at last. "No," I replied, watching another human transmission slip past our filters. Because for humans, victory was not a single decisive moment. It was endurance stretched across impossible odds. And as our fleets pressed inward, bleeding slowly from 1,000 unseen cuts, a chilling understanding crystallized within me. Humanity had not built a civilization optimized for peace, stability, or elegance. They had built one optimized for catastrophe. And we had just given them exactly what they were designed to survive. Somewhere beyond our detection grids, beyond the debris and deception,
Phase 2 was already unfolding, and we were walking directly into it. The first task force did not explode. It did not transmit distress. It did not even slow. It simply ceased to exist. At the edge of the Heliox expanse, 3 systems beyond Earth's outer colonies, Task Force Variant vanished mid-formation. 27 warships, 2 carrier platforms, over 60,000 personnel. Our long-range arrays recorded them entering routine patrol alignment. Then static. Not the violent flare of destruction. Not the gravitational distortion of catastrophic implosion. Absence. In the silence that followed, a narrow-band signal bled across the void. Crude, human. The message repeated 3 times before dissolving into cosmic background noise. Panic did not erupt in the command chambers, but something colder did. A fracture in certainty. Admirals demanded sensor replays. Engineers blamed instrument failure. Statisticians insisted on improbable coincidence. Then a second task force vanished. Different sector, different commander, same pattern. No debris, no energy spike, no warp signature, only static, and the same human transmission. We are still here. Pride began to rot into fear. Our fleets, once arranged in aggressive spearhead formations, shifted into defensive arrays. Supply convoys traveled under heavy escort, patrol routes tightened, internal security protocols escalated to wartime paranoia. It did not matter. The disappearances continued, not daily, but unpredictably. A cruiser isolated during a routine jump, a reconnaissance wing lagging behind formation, a logistics hub positioned in what we believed to be secure territory. Gone. I was assigned to analyze recovered fragments from one of the rare partial incidents, a cruiser that did not vanish entirely, but drifted back into our sensor range months later. Its engines were dead, hull temperature near absolute zero, as if it had floated through interstellar dark without power. Boarding teams found compartments vented to vacuum, corridors scorched not by external fire but by internal sabotage, data cores removed with surgical precision. Security footage from the final hours revealed the truth. Human Marines descended upon the hull like shadows given form. Their vessels had approached cold, heat signatures masked beneath massive radiative sinks, hulls coated in adaptive materials that bent sensor returns into meaningless echoes. They drifted for weeks, perhaps months, in perfect silence before striking. The footage showed no battle cries, no rage, only method. Magnetic boots locked onto plating. Cutting torches opened entry points in exact symmetry. Teams split with outspoken command, moving through corridors with pre-mapped efficiency. One of our officers attempted resistance. The human Marine disarmed him in 3 motions and continued forward without pause. They were not there to conquer. They were there to cripple. Engines sabotaged, communications arrays seeded with dormant code, tactical databases extracted, then withdrawal. By the time reinforcements arrived, the humans were gone, not fleeing in chaos, departing on schedule. We had prepared for a species that would rally fleets in glorious last stands. Instead, we faced ghosts. Further analysis revealed the scale of their preparation. Deep in uncharted interstellar regions, zones we deemed resource poor and strategically irrelevant, heat signatures flared faintly, artificial structures adrift between stars.
Shipyards concealed within rogue planetary systems, vessels parked cold in the dark, crews suspended in cryogenic sleep for years at a time, waiting. Humanity had seeded the void long before we declared them extinct. They had anticipated orbital defeat. They had planned for occupation. They had dispersed beyond the gravitational well of any single world. We had searched for them where empires search, planets, colonies, infrastructure. They had hidden, rarely look, in emptiness. Attrition replaced open war. Our supply lines frayed under invisible assault. Warp relays malfunctioned under subtle viral intrusion. Navigation beacons transmitted corrupted coordinates that sent ships light years off course before the error was detected. And always, when a fleet disappeared, the transmission followed. We are still here. The psychological toll rippled outward from the military into civilian systems. Markets within our core worlds destabilized. Resource speculation surged. Insurance indices for frontier sectors collapsed entirely. Allied species, those who had pledged loyalty under the promise of our protection, began requesting independent defense treaties.
For the first time in centuries, doubt infected imperial discourse. Our myth of invincibility had been carefully cultivated across generations. We did not merely conquer, we demonstrated inevitability. Resistance was framed as futile before it began. Humanity rejected futility. Worse, they made survival look deliberate. Intelligence reports confirmed coordinated strikes light years apart, executed with temporal precision impossible without advanced synchronization. Either their faster-than-light communications rivaled our own, or they had predicted our responses with terrifying accuracy. I began to suspect something deeper. Humans did not need to outmatch us technologically in every domain. They needed only to understand us. They had studied our doctrine during the invasion's early stages, mapped our fleet rotations, identified which admirals favored aggression over caution, exploited predictable pride. We sought decisive conquest. They chose erosion. A blade that cuts once may miss. A blade that cuts 1,000 times eventually finds the heart. Casualty reports mounted, not catastrophic enough to justify retreat, but persistent enough to erode morale. Crew members reported phantom sensor contacts, shadows and maintenance corridors, audio glitches whispering human phrases through secure channels. Whether these were genuine infiltrations or symptoms of strain no longer mattered. Fear had entered our ships. The Senate convened emergency war councils. Hardliners demanded escalation, planetary sterilization of Earth to eliminate any remaining infrastructure. Others urged consolidation and strategic withdrawal to fortified sectors. But withdrawal would signal weakness, and weakness invited rebellion. So they chose a third path.
If the humans would not present a fleet for annihilation, if they would not negotiate, if they insisted on haunting us from the dark, then we would drag them into the light. An operation was proposed, covert, surgical. Identify a human strike team, allow them to board under controlled conditions, trap and capture a living specimen, extract intelligence directly, interrogate the architects of this attritional nightmare. Many objected. Humans had proven unpredictable. Capturing one risked infiltration, sabotage, unknown variables. But pride, wounded and desperate, outweighed caution. We will understand them, the high strategist declared before the Senate. I watched the vote pass with overwhelming approval. In that moment, I felt something colder than fear. Recognition. We had just chosen to reach into the dark where ghosts reside, and ghosts, when seized, rarely come alone. The trap was perfect. We allowed one of our cruisers to drift, engines sputtering, communications fragmented, hull integrity fluctuating just enough to appear vulnerable. It limped through contested space like wounded prey. They came exactly as predicted. A human strike vessel emerged from thermal invisibility, gliding on minimal output. Boarding pods attached in synchronized silence. Magnetic clamps sealed. Cutting torches bloomed against our hull like controlled stars. But this time, we were waiting. Internal bulkheads sealed behind them. Gravity shifted without warning. Electromagnetic pulses rippled through corridors in precise intervals. One by one, the human Marines were isolated. Most chose self-destruction over capture. One did not. She fought with lethal efficiency, disabling 3 of our soldiers even as suppression fields tightened around her. When the containment lattice finally solidified, she stood within it, breathing hard, visor cracked, eyes steady. She did not look afraid. She looked disappointed. Within hours, she was transported under maximum security to our capital world, the luminous heart of our empire. The Senate demanded spectacle. They demanded answers. The chamber had witnessed the surrender of kings and the extinction pleas of elder species. Its vaulted ceiling shimmered with projected constellations representing systems we had claimed. Into that chamber, we brought a single human. Her armor had been removed. Restraint fields shimmered faintly around her limbs, yet she stood upright, chin lifted, gaze sweeping across the assembled senators, as if evaluating them. "Force her to kneel," one demanded. The suppression field intensified. She did not kneel. Her muscles trembled under gravitational amplification, but she remained standing. It was not strength that held her upright. It was will. The high strategist addressed her first. "Your species is eradicated. Your fleets scatter like vermin in the dark." She studied him in silence before speaking. Her voice was raw from battle, yet clear. A murmur rippled through the chamber.
We initiated interrogation protocols, neural resonance mapping, truth pattern analysis, psychological stressors calibrated for maximum compliance. She endured them with alarming composure. When presented with footage of Earth's bombardment, the continents burning, the oceans churning under kinetic assault, We anticipated grief, rage, a crack in composure. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly. "Phase 2 confirmed," she whispered. The phrase struck me like a physical blow. We pressed her harder, demanded clarification, displayed casualty projections, simulated annihilation of remaining human strongholds. Her responses came fragmented but consistent. Data began correlating in real time. For generations, long before we initiated contact, human probes had departed their system in quiet succession, missions publicly framed as scientific exploration, resource surveys, deep space observation. We had monitored some, dismissed others as inefficient ambition. We now understood. They had not been exploring. They had been planting. Under sustained interrogation, pieces of a larger architecture emerged. Rogue planets terraformed in isolation, asteroids hollowed into rotating habitats, shipyards concealed within dense nebulae where sensor distortion masked industrial signatures. They had seeded redundancy across the galaxy like spores on a stellar wind. Earth had not been their singular cradle, it had been their signal fire. When we revealed footage of our early invasion triumph, the destruction of their orbital defenses, the collapse of their communications grid, the chamber expected despair to surface at last. She smiled faintly. The high strategist's composure faltered for the first time. "Impossible," he hissed. "Predictable," she corrected. Then our deep space arrays ignited. It began as a surge in background noise, minor fluctuations across distant sectors. Then discrete signals emerged, coordinated, structured. Warp signatures, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, then tens of thousands. They flared to life in regions we had cataloged but never occupied. Uncharted trinary systems, rogue planetary clusters, interstellar voids deemed strategically worthless. Human vessels emerged from darkness we believed empty. Their designs varied wildly. Sleek military hulls alongside improvised constructs clearly assembled from civilian frameworks, mining ships armored into war platforms, colony transports bristling with weapon arrays. They did not converge on Earth. They converged on us. Simultaneously, encrypted transmissions flooded known trade routes, messages to species we had subjugated, offers of alliance, tactical data exposing our supply corridors, our garrison weaknesses, our political schisms. They knew our empire intimately. "Too intimately," one senator whispered. The human officer answered without prompting. Centuries of conquest had made us complacent. Our logistics patterns were efficient, but repetitive.
Our diplomatic coercion left records. Our rivalries with neighboring powers were no secret. They had studied every campaign we waged against lesser civilizations. They had prepared countermeasures before we ever chose them as a target. Our outer defense ring reported first contact within the hour. Human fleets executing coordinated strikes against relay hubs. Warp interdiction fields deployed in perfect alignment with our most critical transit lanes. This was not retaliation born of desperation. It was activation. From her containment field, the human watched the Senate chamber's holographic displays flicker with escalating alerts. "You wanted us centralized," she said softly.
"You came looking for ghosts," she said quietly. Outside, the void itself seemed to burn with arriving fleets. And for the first time in our recorded history, the Empire did not look eternal. It looked surrounded. Empires do not collapse in explosions. They unravel in whispers. Its governor transmitted a carefully worded statement citing disrupted supply lines and the need for localized defense. Within hours, 3 more systems followed. Within days, entire sectors went silent. Our empire had been built on projection of certainty. Trade flowed because we were invincible. Alliances endured because resistance was futile. Tribute was paid because the alternative was annihilation. Now, annihilation had a new face, and it was not ours. Human fleets did not immediately press their advantage toward our core worlds. Instead, they appeared in the skies of our former vassals, and they did not fire. They transmitted. It was not a demand for surrender. It was an invitation. Open channels flooded with offers of mutual defense treaties, shared technology, resource pooling, equal representation in strategic councils. Equal. The word reverberated like heresy through our Senate. We had ruled through hierarchy. Command flowed from center to edge. Obedience ensured cohesion. Diversity of thought was tolerated only within narrow bounds of strategic utility. Humans offered something far more dangerous: choice. Reports flooded in from peripheral systems. Species we had subjugated for generations, forced into resource quotas and military levies, were accepting human protection. Not because they were coerced, because they were asked. Our intelligence divisions attempted to frame it as manipulation, psychological warfare, strategic deceit. But the footage told another story. I watched recordings from the Cathari system, once stripped of its orbital infrastructure for our fleet construction. Human ships arrived in non-aggressive formation. They deployed defensive satellites first, not weapons. Their diplomats, unarmed, boarded Cathari stations. Within weeks, trade resumed under cooperative agreements. Food shipments arrived, medical supplies, terraforming assistance. Human vessels remained in orbit, but not as occupiers, as guardians. Our own citizens began to question what they saw. For centuries, imperial broadcasts had depicted conquered species as beneficiaries of our order. We brought stability, infrastructure, unity. But stability enforced through fear differs from stability chosen. Markets within our core systems trembled. Investors withdrew from frontier exploitation projects. Recruitment into the Imperial Navy slowed for the first time in recorded history. Whispers spread among civilians. The High Strategist ordered a decisive demonstration of strength. Target, a coalition holding forming in the Terrian Expanse, a nexus of liberated systems coordinating defense under human guidance. The plan was overwhelming force. 3 battle groups, 2 carrier divisions.
Planetary siege platforms. Crush the coalition publicly. Reassert inevitability. I watched the armada depart with ceremonial precision, hulls gleaming, banners broadcasting imperial insignia across the void. They arrived to find a patchwork fleet awaiting them. It was not impressive by traditional metrics. Hull designs mismatched, armor plating uneven, weapon arrays improvised from industrial frameworks, vessels bearing scars from previous engagements. At their center drifted a human command carrier, sleek, unadorned, flanked not by identical warships, but by diversity. Cathari Kumzers, Velaran frigates, even defected Imperial corvettes refitted with coalition markings. It should have been chaos. It was harmony. The battle began with our standard opening maneuver, long-range kinetic saturation designed to shatter defensive cohesion. The coalition responded with something I had never witnessed on such scale: sacrifice without hesitation. Human destroyers accelerated into incoming fire trajectories, deploying layered shielding to absorb impacts meant for allied ships. Velaran frigates interlocked power grids to reinforce a damaged Cathari cruiser. Coalition vessels repositioned not for optimal firing arcs, but to maintain coverage over weaker allies. They fought as if every ship mattered, because to them it did. Our commanders adapted,
shifting to flanking maneuvers. The coalition fragmented, intentionally. Smaller units peeled away, drawing segments of our fleet into pursuit corridors seeded with mines and gravitational distortions. Probability models predicted collapse of coalition coordination under such pressure. Instead, their decentralized command structure flourished. Human tactical officers issued broad objectives rather than rigid directives. Allied captains executed based on shared intent rather than strict hierarchy. We had unity through obedience. They had unity through conviction. When one coalition vessel was crippled, 3 others altered course without awaiting orders. When our cruisers targeted what appeared to be their central command ship, it rotated behind overlapping shield arrays formed spontaneously by surrounding allies. Even as casualties mounting, morale broadcasts from the coalition flooded open frequencies. Not propaganda, encouragement. Our admirals grew frustrated. Decisive victory required concentration force, but every attempt to focus fire created openings elsewhere. The coalition did not attempt to match our strength. They redistributed ours. At the battle's apex, the High Strategist authorized deployment of a siege platform capable of annihilating an entire planetary surface. It locked onto the coalition's primary staging world. And then something unprecedented occurred. Human ships, dozens of them, accelerated directly into the weapon's projected firing line. Their shields flared to maximum output, interlinking in cascading layers. Allied vessels followed, reinforcing the barrier.
They knew the blast would cripple them. They did it anyway. The siege platform fired. The void ignited. When the light faded, the coalition's shield lattice was shattered, but the planet behind it endured. Human vessels drifted, many powerless, some ruptured beyond repair. Yet from the debris, transmissions rose. We shall beat them. Not as taunt, as promise. The psychological impact struck our fleet harder than the weapon discharge. Our crews watched enemies willingly absorb devastation for allies not of their own species. That kind of loyalty cannot be enforced. It must be earned. Our formation faltered, not in discipline, but in certainty. What were we fighting for? Territory? Tribute? Preservation of an order built on fear? Across open channels, coalition leaders broadcast casualty reports transparently, honored fallen from every species equally, no hierarchy of sacrifice. I felt something shift within me then, a fracture not of strategy, but of belief. The Empire had taught us that strength flowed from control, that diversity weakened cohesion, that mercy invited exploitation. Humans inverted the equation. Their diversity multiplied resilience. Their mercy forged alliances. Their willingness to share power amplified influence beyond what conquest could achieve. Our greatest strength, centralized command, became rigidity. When communication relays were disrupted, entire divisions hesitated awaiting orders. Coalition units adapted instantly. When the High Strategist ordered retreat to regroup, it was framed as tactical repositioning. But every being present understood the truth. We had failed to break them. More dangerously, we had failed to divide them. As our armada withdrew, coalition fleets did not pursue aggressively. They reformed around damaged ships, towed the crippled, distributed power reserves. Victory to them was survival shared. Back in the Senate chamber, debate raged with unprecedented intensity. Some demanded total war escalation, planetary sterilization across liberated systems. Others warned that such action would only accelerate defections. For the first time in our history, the Empire's greatest threat was not external assault, it was internal doubt. Because the galaxy was watching human coalitions thrive where our occupation had merely subdued, watching former vassals stand willingly beside their once destroyed enemy, watching an empire accustomed to obedience struggle against an alliance fueled by belief. The human officer we had captured remained in containment, observing developments through filtered feeds. When news of the Terran Expanse battle reached her, she closed her eyes briefly. "We shall beat them," she said softly. "We have won the internal battle." Outside our capital, coalition fleets continued to gather, not in chaotic swarms, but in deliberate constellations. And for the first time, I understood the true scale of what we faced. We were not fighting a species. We were fighting an idea that said power protects, not dominates.
An idea that spread faster than any fleet. An idea our empire had never prepared to confront. And ideas, once ignited, are very difficult to extinguish. The sky above our capital no longer belonged to us. From the highest observation spire of the Senate complex, I watched warp space tear open in silent cascades. Human vessels emerged in disciplined formation, but they did not advance into bombardment range. They arranged themselves in concentric layers beyond our defensive perimeter. Behind them arrived others, Cathari cruisers, Veloran frigates, dozens of species once bound to our rule, now standing in coordinated alignment beside the very civilization we had declared extinct. It was not an invasion formation. It was a wall. Our sensors strained to quantify the armada. The number grew with each recalibration, tens of thousands of ships forming a lattice that encircled our system without tightening its grip. They could have fired. They did not. Within the Senate chamber, chaos reigned. Evacuation protocols activated across governmental tiers. Data vaults began emergency compression. High-ranking officials argued for strategic withdrawal to fortified sectors deeper within Imperial space. I did not leave. I remained at my station to record what I knew would be the end of something far greater than a war. For the first time in our recorded history, the Empire faced a force it could not intimidate. Our outer defense platforms locked on to coalition ships. Weapon capacitors hummed at full charge. A single command would ignite a battle capable of sterilizing the system. But even our admirals hesitated, because the armada outside was not poised to conquer. It was poised to endure. The human officer remained in containment within the chamber's lower tier. She had observed every escalation without visible triumph. When the encirclement was confirmed complete, she made a request. Laughter met the proposal at first, then silence. Against all logic, against centuries of doctrine, the High Strategist granted it. Perhaps he wished to display dominance one final time. Perhaps he sought leverage. Or perhaps, like me, he sensed that this moment required clarity more than pride. The suppression field around her lowered slightly, enough to permit speech without restraint. She stepped forward. No armor, no weapon, only presence. The chamber's vaulted ceiling dimmed, shifting from projected constellations of conquest to a live feed of the armada outside. Coalition ships filled the sky in patient stillness. You surround our capital, the High Strategist began coldly, and yet you do not attack. She looked upward at the projection, then back at us. A murmur spread. You attacked our homeworld, she continued. You declared us extinct. You hunted us across the dark. Her words were not shouted. They carried weight precisely because they did not need to. We learned something about you, she said. You believe strength means control, that fear ensures stability.
Several senators shifted uncomfortably. She gestured toward the projection of coalition fleets. Strength protects, it doesn't dominate. Unity is chosen. The High Strategist's voice sharpened. I expect you to choose survival, she replied evenly. The chamber quieted. She began to lay out what we had failed to anticipate. Not threats, not ultimatums, but probabilities. You can fire, she said. Your fleets are powerful. You'll destroy many of us, maybe most, but not all. She paused. We've already dismantled your outer supply chains. Your border systems are negotiating independence. Data streams confirmed her claims in real time. Peripheral sectors continued to declare neutrality or alignment with the coalition. If you continue the cycle, she said softly, we dismantle you piece by piece. It will take time. It will cost lives. The chamber's air felt heavier than vacuum. Or, she continued, you stand down. You join us. Not beneath us. Not above us. A ripple of disbelief. So one senator demanded. She met his gaze. We don't need another enemy. Silence fell. Not forced, but organic. For the first time in Imperial history, no voice rushed to dominate the discourse. Outside, coalition fleets held formation. No aggressive maneuvers, no weapon discharges. Their restraint was louder than any barrage. I studied the sensor telemetry. They had positioned themselves not merely to attack, but to intercept any outbound Imperial fleet attempting escape or retaliation. This was not encirclement for slaughter. It was containment. The High Strategist looked older than I had ever seen him. You speak of balance, he said. She nodded once. The honesty of it struck deeper than insult. You taught us that, she added. In that moment, realization settled across the chamber like descending gravity. Humanity had mirrored us long enough to survive us, but they had not become us. they had chosen a different conclusion. The high strategist issued a command, quiet, almost inaudible. To hesitate now is weakness, a senator protested. No, he said slowly, eyes fixed on the projection of coalition ships. Across our system, weapon signatures dimmed, capacitors discharged harmlessly into space. Defense platforms shifted from attack mode to standby. The coalition armada did not advance. They held. The human officer exhaled softly, as if releasing a tension she had carried since capture. You made the right call, she said. No triumph, no gloating, only acknowledgement. The high strategist turned to the chamber. To enter an alliance. The words echoed heavier than any declaration of conquest in our history. And yet, the sky did not burn. Our cities did not fall. Our species was not eradicated. Instead, channels opened. Secure frequencies bridged between former enemies. Proposals exchanged. Conditions debated. The war did not end with annihilation. It ended with recalibration.
In the days that followed, coalition representatives entered our capital, not as conquerors, but as delegates. Resource agreements restructured, military doctrines revised, subjugated systems granted autonomy under collective defense guarantees. For the first time, our empire was no longer an empire. It was a participant. As I finalize this record, the armada that once encircled us has dispersed, not in retreat, but in integration. Joint patrols now guard trade routes once monopolized by our fleets. Shared research initiatives replace arms races. We declared humanity extinct. Instead, they transformed the galaxy. What terrifies me most is not their firepower, it is their restraint. They proved something we never understood. Power tempered by empathy does not weaken authority, it legitimizes it. And now, as our banners are lowered and new emblems rise beside them, I realize the truth that will define this era. We were not spared because we deserved it. We were spared because they chose a future larger than revenge. This is the Empire's last broadcast, not of defeat, but of awakening. And beyond our once exclusive skies, a new constellation forms, not of domination, but of balance. Years have passed since the day we declared them extinct. I sometimes replay that transmission in private archives, the certainty in our voices, the finality of our tone. It feels like listening to a different species speak. I no longer serve an empire. I serve as liaison to the human coalition. The title would have sounded like treason once. Now it feels like evolution. I have walked the surface of Earth since its reconstruction began. The scars of orbital bombardment remain visible from space. Continents reshaped, coastlines altered, but life thrives in the ruins. Cities rebuilt not as monuments to dominance, but as networks of resilience. Energy grids decentralized, infrastructure layered with redundancies learned through pain. I have visited worlds that once paid us tribute. Cathari orbital habitats hum with joint research stations staffed by 3 species working side by side. Valoran shipyards construct vessels designed not only for combat, but for disaster relief and evacuation. Coalition defense networks remain formidable, perhaps more so than our empire at its peak, but their posture is different, vigilant, not oppressive. We once believed unpredictability was a flaw in human design. Their political shifts, their emotional volatility, their capacity for internal conflict. Now I understand. What we labeled unpredictability was adaptability. When systems fail, they reconfigure. When leaders falter, others rise. When catastrophe strikes, they do not freeze, they iterate. We mistook compassion for weakness, yet it was compassion that forged alliances faster than fear ever could. We mistook unity for fragility, yet their unity was never rigid. It flexed under pressure without breaking. We mistook emotion for instability, yet emotion fueled endurance.
It reminded them what they were protecting. Humans endure because they refuse to surrender hope, not as blind optimism, but as strategic doctrine. Even at the brink of annihilation, they planned beyond it. Phase 1, Phase 2. They had imagined extinction long before we attempted to deliver it. They prepared not just weapons, but futures. I once asked the officer we captured, now a coalition commander, why they offered us peace when they could have dismantled us entirely. Her answer remains etched into my memory. Our empire sought control of the galaxy. We measured success in territory acquired, fleets amassed, obedience enforced.
Humanity chose something stranger. They chose to belong to the galaxy, to weave themselves into it so thoroughly that removing them would tear the whole structure apart. In doing so, they became more than a military power. They became a stabilizing force. Guardians, not by proclamation, but by practice. And perhaps the most profound lesson of all is this: strength does not diminish when shared, it multiplies. I record these words not as confession, nor as praise, but as testimony. We once looked upon humanity and saw chaos. Now we look upon them and see possibility. The galaxy is no longer ruled by fear of a single dominant force. It is protected by a coalition bound not by chains, but by choice. We declared them extinct. Instead, they ensured that none of us would face extinction alone. And that, more than any fleet, any weapon, any empire, is why they endure.